This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it's time for How to Superage with Elise Marie Collins. Each show is sponsored by the books she has written to provide us with opportunities of living our best lives. Check out Amazon for Chakra Tonics, essential elixirs for the mind, body, and soul, and the A to Z Guide to Healing Foods, a shopper's reference. And most importantly for me, Superager. You can look younger, have energy, a better memory, and live a long and healthy life. And I have to tell you, Elise, that in the last 6 months, while I've been recovering from a broken injury, I've been using Superager a lot. And I use it the way you told me to. I just open it up, and whatever page it opens up to, that's what I read. And I take that information and say to myself, how can I use that today? And it's been very, very helpful. So for all of you listening, welcome to How to Superage. And I'm going to turn it over to Elise right now.
Oh, thank you so much, Karen. Yes, and we've got a lot to talk about today with our guest. And how do you say your name?
Teza
Teza.
Lord.
Teza Lord. And she is an amazing person. She is a Caribbean she pirate. She's a public share of everything sacred. We're going to talk about so many layers of being today because we have all of us, we decided that, well, we realized that we've all suffered from either fractures or broken bones lately. But then so that's like the physical, right? That's the physical. We can touch it, we can feel it. But there's also the sacred, the spiritual, and that is part of our healing too. So I'm really excited to talk about these layers today. And I just want to say a little bit about Teza, and she's going to tell us who she is. But we are one in my language, sacred, crazy, thank goddess. She's an artist. She talks about recovery from addiction being one of our teachers, and how modern spirituality is environmentalism. So I love these connections. Our spirit is the environment. We can't disconnect those. When we heal the planet, we heal ourselves and vice versa. So she's sounds like she's women centered, and she also likes to laugh. So she's not taking herself too seriously. So tell
Not
us
in...
more. Who is Teza?
Okay. Well, I'm so happy to be here, Elise. Thank you so much. And well, I could talk forever, but we should start with the most important thing. Environmentalism, I think, is the 21st century's spirituality, and it's on everybody's mind. And of course, this talk that we're having is about aging gracefully or super aging, and it fits in with the planet because look how old the planet is, billions of years old. And I believe that at this point in time, I can feel the planet crying for help. And my latest book, which is a novel, and most of my books are nonfiction, and my first book was an art manifesto, but my latest book is called The Bridge Tender, and that really is a book that was commissioned by Great Mother of the universe. And by that, I mean the divine, the sacred. And the Divine Mother commissioned the author, who happens to be me, to tell the story of how we have to listen more carefully to the messages that come from the unseen world, not just the here and now, not just our bodies, where, yes, when we have a broken bone, we have to pay attention, but also to those quiet, still moments of what do we need? Do we need more sleep? Do we need better company? Do we need to read better books? So much happens in stillness and the unseen realm. So that's a good place to start. And for me, I have been a lifelong yoga person and a lifelong meditator. I actually was initiated in the first wave of the TM movement, Transcendental Meditation, in '68. That's the same year that my husband graduated from college. And when it first came to the States, this art of sitting still in the guise of transcendental meditation, they had talks, public talks. And this was in Cambridge, Mass, where Harvard University was. I was a botanical illustrator there. But when they talked about that stillness within, they didn't say anything about spirituality. They said, earn better salaries and accomplish better feats, because it was Harvard. And their audience was, career oriented, and people were not that interested in spirituality back in 68. And lo and behold, here it is, 2025, and the buzzword today is spirituality or mindfulness or presence and oneness. These are all just such great buzzwords that we're talking about, but it all starts with paying attention to the unseen things that are happening in our existence. So I hope that's a little bit of an introduction.
Yeah, that's a lot. What brought you to meditate? Was it that call to do better, to achieve more, or was it something else? Yeah, because
No, no,
nodding
no.
your head. I want to hear about
I was
that
in
because it was a different time.
I was in such pain as a young person. I came from a very dysfunctional home, alcoholism, abuse, just not being treated the way I treat my children today and grandchildren. And I just felt so sad. And I felt completely irrelevant and couldn't relate to anything. And so I started having physical problems. And I'm talking, I was 18, 19 years old. I couldn't sleep, had nightmares, was scared of life. And so, of course, addiction kicked in. That's usually what addiction is about, just to get some relief from pain. And so finally, I had a horrible pain where I couldn't even stand up straight. It was just consistently right around my belly area. And so a friend of mine had just started meditating. And he said, why don't you try meditation? Because the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. There were no test results. They had scheduled exploratory surgery. And I said, yes, I'll do anything, rather than cut me up. So I dragged myself, actually my friend dragged me to receive an initiation. And it's like a formal, you ask for help. It's just like the Sistine Chapel in Rome. If anybody has seen that beautiful ceiling by Michelangelo, there's God and there's Adam. And Adam is reaching out and God is receiving his plea, and they're almost touching because they're not quite the same. God and man are not the same, but you have to ask for help. And so when I received my initiation, it was like a bomb had gone off into my mind, and a beautiful bomb of light, and everything was lifted and the pain went away, never came back, because I was introduced to another way of being, another reality besides the here and now. And so I went back to show the doctors, look at me, I'm healed. And they were so curious. This was 1968. And they were just starting to put it together that the mind controls how the body is. And that relationship is so integral to our health. So that's how I got into meditation.
I love that. Did you have a question, Karen? You look.
No, I just find it so interesting because, I never thought of it being something that you would be taken to and initiated into, because every time it's been recommended, that I do meditation, it's like, just go home and be in a quiet spot and breathe and let your mind just go. It's like nobody's told me that they can show me or introduce me to it.
Yeah. Well, you should check out my YouTube channel, because I have all
don't.
sorts of, I have little videos. I call them mind stillers. But don't forget, this is 2025. Back in 68, where could you go? There was no yoga studio. I learned yoga from a book. And to learn meditation from a book is very hard. And so the TM people in Transcendental Meditation, they offered initiation, as they do today, for quite a hefty fee. And every teacher who has a soul and a heart will offer meditation for free. And so it's something that we share now, just like we do good food. when I was younger, there was no such thing as brown bread. Everybody was eating Wonder Bread. And now, who's eating Wonder Bread?
Right.
I don't know. And so it's like the dregs of the dregs. So our culture has changed, and we're embracing spirituality, and meditation has become very available. But you can still go to places and become initiated in a certain method of meditation, a certain mantra technique, for instance. Mantra is usually given as a gift by a teacher to a student.
I love this. I just want to highlight a couple things that you've said, Teza, uh, because one of the things I find in this era is people are obsessed with evidence-based science, evidence-based, and I think that's a good thing. But I think it's also important to follow your intuition and to listen to that still small voice that you've spoke about. The reason I'm bringing that up is because for me, I started doing yoga. Let's see, it's been a long time, but it was probably was it the 80s or the 90s? Somewhere around there. It was a long time ago. It was at least 30 years ago. I took my first class, and there was people that did it before, like you said, it was, you know, we could go on. We could have a whole show about the history of yoga, but that's not
Yeah.
what it's about. The reason I'm saying it is because there was no evidence. I mean, nobody was studying yoga. Now there is thousands and millions of studies of yoga and how good it is. But when I started doing yoga, there was no studies, nobody, I just knew it felt great.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like you had the same experience with meditation. You knew you were onto something. So I just want to encourage people, don't be so caught up in the evidence, because evidence takes years. I actually worked on a yoga study, and like it was 5 years before they had any evidence. So
Yeah.
if you're older, you're going to be waiting. You might miss some opportunities there. So I just wanted to.
But there's a great book. I'm just reading it now. It's called The Tao of Physics. It was published in the late 70s, and it's exactly what you're talking about. But it was written before the 80s, and it said, no, people, don't rely just on science, because if you want great physics to happen in this quantum day, you have to rely upon the intuitive forces, which is the unseen forces, it's our spirit. And it's a wonderful book showing how physics is really catching up with ancient scriptures of the yogic world, the Vedas, the Chinese Taoism. It's phenomenal. But these studies have been slow in coming, and physicists who work to achieve new things, they know now that they have to rely upon their intuition as much as they do facts. And so it's a wonderful book to explore.
Thank you. Who's the author of that book?
I haven't committed it to memory yet, but it's by
That's okay.
Shambhala Press. He's got a funny
Yeah,
name. It sounds like
Shambhala Press.
Romanian. Yeah,
People
Shambhala
look that
Press.
up.
The Tao of Physics.
I think I've heard of it, and I do. My son is actually a quantum physicist,
Oh
so
boy.
I
Well, he
tell him
probably,
to follow his intuition. But he also laughs because we have a kind of ongoing joke about there's a lot, because there is a lot of new age people that talk about quantum physics,
mm-hmm.
and what he says is he's done the equations, and I'm like, yeah, right. He spent the time on the weekends plugging the numbers in. But so I give him, I'm like, you can say, I don't say I know anything about it. He'll
Yeah.
explain stuff to me, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. But if I try to explain it to both of you, you'll be confused.
Yes,
Well,
probably.
he'd really love that book if he has not yet consumed it, because it's more than East meets West. It's really where the understanding of existence is. It relies upon, yes, facts and test and experiences, which is science. And then there's also the intuition that you can't put under a microscope. It's just like our soul.
Right.
Nobody can prove we have a soul, but we all know we do.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. So you were a botanist. Did you say you were a
A
botanist?
botanical illustrator.
Botanical
I
illustrator.
worked with botanists. I worked with the chief of the world that is now known as plant medicines, Schultes, who was the guy who went to the Amazon and discovered ayahuasca, which everybody's talking about these days, and he came back to Harvard. So I was on his team, an illustrator. But being an illustrator, you work very much in tandem, and I ended up even typing PhDs and being the person who takes care of the plants. So I did a wonderful series of all the coca plants. At that time, cocaine was just becoming a scourge in the States. That was the 70s, the early 70s. And the federal government, which is now being really testy about research, commissioned Harvard University to study the effects of coca on humankind, going back to the indigenous. So that was one study. And then other sister plants. And my early work are featured in a book called Plants of the Gods, because they're all called divination plants, like peyote, and plants that the indigenous world has used for eons to, once again, commune with the unseen. So it's all coming together now in this beautiful time, this modern time that we have.
I love it. So fast forward to 2025, what are you doing? How are you bringing this all together, and how is this helping you and others to age well?
Yeah, so it's a really exciting time in my life because I am reinventing myself. I don't know if you're aware of the book called "A Life Well Lived" by Gladys McGarey.
Yes.
And she wrote it at the age of 102. She passed away last year at the age of 103. But it's a beautiful book. And one of the things she says, she's a holistic doctor. She was an osteopathic pediatrician. And she put forth her formula for having an amazingly successful life. And she said, always have a 10-year plan. So as soon as I read that book, I was turning 76. And I said, okay, I'm going to have a 10-year plan. And I'm in the midst of it. I'm eliminating one whole section of my life, which is holding on to waiting to be discovered. You know, hello, who cares about that? It's not important about if somebody knows my name or reads my books or sees my art. What's important is I keep being a channel and a funnel for this energy that I feel so alive. And so I'm starting my latest book, which is already written, so it'll be the final edit. And it may turn out to be a trilogy because there's quite a bit of information. So I have a book project, and I have an ongoing art project where I take remains of other animals like skeletons and feathers and crystals, and I put them together in sculptures. So I have a beautiful studio back at my home in St. Augustine, Florida. And right now I'm on vacation. So my husband and I are camping and being with friends for the next month. And one other thing, we have a boat trip planned, which is really an amazing trip. We're going to go up the intracoastal waterway and just take our time and just be with nature and live very frugally and close to the bone.
Love
That's
that.
what we like to do.
What is that waterway you're talking about? Where is it?
It's called the Intracoastal Waterway. It goes all the way from New York City down to Florida, like Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And my husband had taken a boat trip from New York to Florida way back when in his 20s. So we're basically revisiting his memories of heading for the places that are really desolate, not close to any major cities around the Carolinas, hoping to avoid any hurricanes, or else we'll have to postpone it. But my husband and I, who's a filmmaker, by the way, we make films together too. We do these long trips. Our most recent one was we went to South America for 3 months. We visited Bolivia and Chile and went down to Patagonia. That was wonderful. And we go sometimes on a 6-month camping trip. Then that's how we started our podcast, which is Z Lord Podcast. We talk about traveling. And then when the pandemic came, we said, okay, we can't travel on the outside anymore. So we started traveling on the inside. And we just sat on our couch and talked about the inside journey.
Beautiful. I mean, you are an exception to most of us who are considered seniors.
Yeah.
And the world expects that we get to a certain age and we retire and just wait our time. We don't necessarily sit on the porch on a rocking chair, but I have been telling my listeners for the last 13 years, it's not about age. It's about living life. And you prove that you could live life sitting on your couch and not miss a beat. And that is different from so many who say, oh, the pandemic, I got stuck in the house and I'm still stuck in the house. No, let's get up and get moving.
Yeah, well, we create our own lives. Every single choice adds up. I'm sure you know, and your listeners probably know. And so my husband and I, when we married 35 years ago, we were in our 40s, and he had sole custody of these two little kids, and I had never had children. And I said, wow, that's a major life change. Can I do that? And I did, I became a mom at the age of 45. And I used to say to them, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I was like, what's with you guys? And I just really think that the more you're plugged into your creativity, and that of course means having children, that's procreation, or being creative, just embroidering a pillowcase or creating a flower garden. It's so important to be in your creative mode. And so whenever anybody talks to me about, oh, I'm retired, and I say, well, we artists, we don't retire, we just die.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all.
I love that. And I think you really dialed into something with the artist, because it is off the, like, the stages of life trajectory that we are programmed to maybe abide by, but not all of us abide by that. I think also yogis are like that as well. And I do think I listened to the lady you were talking about, A Life Well Lived, Gladys. What was
Gladys
it?
McGarry, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen YouTube videos of
Oh,
her.
she was an influencer.
Yeah, I think I
103,
think
and
I am
her
familiar.
her withered up old face, and she'd be there, and she took questions and answers. It was just a
Yes.
beautiful service she
Yeah,
gave the
yeah.
world.
I do know her. And one of my influencers is another yoga teacher, Dao Porchon Lynch, and
Uh-huh.
she's similar.
Uh-huh.
She died at the
Oh
age of
yeah, right.
50.
I'm quite familiar with her. She was a
Yeah,
ballroom dancer too.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she has a great TED Talk. So when you said that, I wanted to talk about her.
Yeah.
The 10-year plan is a really wonderful idea too, because one of my mentors interviewed he went all over the world and interviewed centenarians and super centenarians. And one of the people he interviewed was 117, and he was planning to, he was a very spiritual person living near Kerala, India. And he was going to do officiating for, like, he was planning to officiate the marriage of his then, child, and like great grandchild. So
Mm-hmm.
we need those plans,
Mm-hmm.
always going ahead 10 years. Because if you are in your mind thinking you're not going to live 10 years,
Right.
it affects things.
Then you probably won't. Because
Exactly.
what we hold in our mind, that's what we become.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm very careful about when I ever have like a bad thought or an uncomfortable thought. I say, "Oh, there I go again," because it's a habit, and I just, oh, okay, just somehow shake it out. And sometimes I actually have to shake my head to get it out.
Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I actually started as a yogi before I was a meditator, because once you start moving the body and the spine, all those chakras awaken. So the meditation comes naturally. But there are some yoga teachers who, I love it, in between asanas or poses, you shake your body and you just kind of do a reset. Resetting is important, and not to get stuck in, oh, I didn't accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. That is such a negative thought.
Speaking of reset, we did touch on this in the very beginning, recently, about has it been 2 weeks? It was 2 weeks from today. I
Mhm.
was at a wedding and I thought they were practical shoes, but they were platform shoes. And
Uh-oh.
on the way back from the wedding, I had a great time dancing and enjoying myself at the wedding. I fractured my fibula.
Oh
And
dear.
so, how
Mm.
do we recover? How do we reset when we have things like, I think we were all talking about different, bones can break and
Mhm.
but we have our spirit. Talk about your
Mhm.
journey of healing and anything along those lines. I'm in the middle of it right now, so any any wisdom
Yeah.
for me and or any listeners, because sometimes these things linger. My son actually injured his ankle skateboarding. He didn't break any bones, but it's been a
Mhm.
lingering injury. So I don't know if this was a empathy, because his right ankle was also injured, and I was like, oh no, no, mine is injured as well.
Oh, wow. Right. Wow. Yeah, the body. We have to honor the body. And I'm a kind of person where I ask myself every day, okay, I have a body, I have a spirit, and I have a mind. And I want to keep all three of them really fresh and in good shape. And so, what do I need to do today, this minute? Because one of them might be out of whack. And so, when you have a broken bone, yeah, that's big time out of whack. And it's painful. So, for me, we were talking earlier, I broke my femur, the crown of my femur, and it developed a really nasty disease which because it didn't heal right, so it was not just a easy fix. It was 2 years of misery, and I had to learn to live with reduced mobility, and and so that was for me a big challenge because I'm a very active person. I do a yoga practice every day. So number one, I had to listen to the doctors. I had to really, do the surgeries and do the PT and show up. Yes, I'm PT and yes, I'm ready to do the doctoring. But meanwhile, because I'm a yogi, as you are too, I also was doing what I could separately that would not injure me, but to kind of be in tune with my body and see the the improvement day by day, the increments. Because when you have a huge setback, you feel like you're at a reset, you're at zero. You have to. You can't go running. You can't even go walking without crutches in your case. And in my case, I was traveling around South America and it was painful. I couldn't even walk more than like half a mile. That was my limit. And I didn't know I had that disease, which the title of it eludes me right now because I don't like to think about it. I'm finished with it. But it's basically the bone had to be removed. And so by having an awareness of the body and seeing that it's in a healing mode and honoring it, that it's not the same as full steam ahead mode, then you say, wow, what an achievement, because I just did a little tiny bit more than I did yesterday. And I didn't have a pain today, and yesterday I did. Or I have a pain today and I need to do a little massaging. I need to give myself some heat. I need to get some more vitamins or bone broth. And you start nursing yourself and you start loving yourself more because we women, we're the nurturers. We're used to giving it to our children, to our community, to our friends. And when the body is broken, we are our number one patient. And so you have to just be kind to yourself and have a love affair with yourself. And especially, I think, to not be discouraged because you can't have the same level of mobility with brokenness, and just to keep things moving however it is. I remember where I live, it's very quiet. So I could start taking little walks, and all our neighbors were saying, wow, look at her, usually so robust. And she's out there. I was wearing walking sticks after my walker, and every day they'd be cheering me on. And one day I would be on just one stick. And like after a couple of weeks, I could walk without sticks. And those are big achievements to
Yeah.
even see that you can take a step. And when I was recovering in the house, as you probably will be, I walked, and that's one thing Gladys McGarry did also. She, during the pandemic, she walked all over her house. She kept up with her, what's the number? 10,000. She just walked around the house. And so during my recovery, I didn't wait to go outside, or if it was a rainy day or if it was just miserable. I just walked the best that I could, however I could, and kept moving and encourage myself. So I think that's very important, that we have to have ourselves as the main nurturing object in our lives for a change.
I love that. Yeah. It's you have the agency to do the self-care for yourself. I mean, it's easy to feel sorry for yourself when you're injured. And another resource is you can just go on YouTube. It's free. I mean, you're going to hear a few commercials unless you subscribe
Mm-hmm.
without commercials. But even today, I was watching there's so many physical therapists that show you, non-weight bearing exercises that you can do when you can't put weight on your leg.
Mm-hmm.
And a little, sometimes you may need some assistance. Because I'm a yoga teacher, I'm like, oh, okay, I know how to do this. I know how to do this. But
Yeah.
it's not just the strength, but the circulation, the life force coming through you when you move your body. I'm wiggling a little. If you're listening,
Yeah. Yeah.
we can wiggle, we can sit in a chair and do different things. But the energy begets energy is what I find. And so I love that you're talking about that
Yeah. And
gradual improvement.
And you probably are familiar with Matthew Bradford. I think that's his name. He's a well-known yoga teacher who became a paraplegic in a terrible automobile accident when he was a kid. But
Mhm.
he's a full body yoga teacher. Are you familiar with him?
Yes.
And I just was so inspired by Matthew's work. I'd heard of him for years, but I actually read his book. And it's a horrific story. I don't really recommend it to anybody because you have to have a really strong stomach for what he went through. But yoga saved his life because he couldn't move anything from his waist down. But when he finally discovered that he could connect with his body, mind, and spirit, even with the few movements he could make in a wheelchair, his whole life changed. And he became a very well known and regarded yoga teacher. And
Yeah.
so I was inspired by that.
Yeah, to me, that's the most important thing. It's not just about the physical. And I also actually work with, uh, do chair yoga. And because I'm a gerontologist, I also work with people with disabilities at all stages of life, because to me,
Mm-hmm.
it is about the life force and these layers. There's the physical, but as you said, the mental and the spiritual. And if your body, it's not about being able-bodied. That's something that always irked me about teaching in yoga studios. It's great to appreciate the movements we can do if we can do this full, like, the push-up kind of movements,
Mm-hmm.
vinyasas. But if you can't do that, that's not what yoga is. It's about you connecting to these layers of yourself, however you describe them.
And you're going to have a journey having a broken ankle, coming up with what they call modifications.
Yeah.
And that good old chair, boy, I really did a lot of chair yoga and was very creative about it, and invented things that I didn't even know I could do. And like when the day came when I could even approach doing something that I used to do, it was a big deal. I celebrated it almost like, an anniversary. And yeah, when your body becomes a measuring stick, because it's not the same every day. People forget that. Some days I can hold a pose for 10 seconds, and the next day I can hold it for a minute. And different levels of stability and stamina and all that stuff, strength.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your creative practice, because that seems so important to you. And how can you recommend to some of our listeners who maybe feel like they're not creative or they don't have a creative practice? Because this is, I would say, in yoga and Ayurveda, the later stages of life are when we do have more creative energy. But if you don't know how to express that, or
Mm-hmm.
you're not familiar, it can feel a little, daunting.
Exactly. I've taught a lot of people who say, "Oh, I don't have a creative bone in my body." And I disprove that to anyone who says that, because when we were kids, all of us like to take crayons and scribble. I mean, sometimes even on the wall, and all it takes is that one word, don't scribble on the wall. And then, you start tightening up and you start, and a lot of negativity about creativity happens in early years. I know when I was raising my husband's children, they were 4 and 7, and the little boy loved to just crayon like crazy, and I encouraged it. And so the teacher said, no, he has to stay within the lines. And I said, no, that's not the way we raise our kids. We just encourage them to have exuberance. And so if somebody's going to say you have to color within the lines, then that's not a good teacher, in my estimation. They kill it. I play the piano, and to this day I cannot play without music, because as I was trying to play as a kid, my teacher would hit my hand with a ruler if I made a wrong note. So I became terrified about just improvising. And so I can play anything if I've got music, but improvising, no. And I would love to do some hypnosis about that, because I'm sure that is a block that I could work out. But I would say that if anybody's seeking their creativity, especially if they've got more time on their hands, which happens with people who don't have to go punch the work clock, or their kids are out of the house. Well, what is it that really, I say, flips your boat and, rock your boat? What turns you on? It could be music. It could be polka dancing. It could be cooking. And I know a lot of people turn to painting. They've always wanted to express that, or maybe they did it when they were children and they never had the time. But being creative could also just be becoming more aware and taking walks and having this opening of awareness. That's a good way to be creative, with our breath and with our body. And I don't mean go out and have a face job. I mean just yeah. I mean, I wish I was some man sometime. I would love to play with my face whiskers, one day a goatee. And I've always wanted to shave my head for like a day. One day I would like to feel what it's like to be bald, but I'm not willing to give up my beautiful hair for much longer than a day. And cooking, I mean, like, for instance, I don't bake anymore because I don't like to get that baking look around the waistline. But a lot of people do, and then they give it away. They offer the cookies to the homeless, or bring it over to somebody who really needs it in a nursing home. And being creative is really okay in terms of yoga. And so, because you're a yoga teacher, at least, the first chakra is just to be alive. As long as we're breathing, we are in that consciousness. The next elevation of consciousness is creativity. So that's where the procreation is. That's where our sexual drive is. And that's where our creative drive is. And it's that close to our survival. Because if you imagine that, okay, they have these TV shows where people are dropped off in the wilderness and they have to live for a contest, but they have to be creative. And when my husband and I go camping, that's being creative, because we like to go off the hard road and we like to just create a fire out of what we have. Or if there's a place where they say no fire, which some campgrounds are because of the threat of big wildfires, like in Texas, Big Bend, which is one of the most magnificent camping spots, we became creative by just staring at the sky and watching the stars. That's being creative. It's sometimes being very quietly creative.
I love that. And you did speak about, that was a very vivid example that you gave about the piano teacher hitting your hand.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry that happened. But I think we can all relate to that, because I think on some level it might not be as obvious, but we had our hands hit, when we were
Mm-hmm.
painting outside the lines, drawing outside the lines,
Right.
going,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something, well, maybe it ties to the environment. I think
Yeah.
we are in a place where we're going between the heart and control. We could
Hmm.
have another whole podcast on this.
Yeah.
Anything
Hmm.
you want to say about the environment and how you are a champion for the environment? It just came to me because I feel like there's some connection there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, because I worked with earth scientists back in the early 70s, I've been aware of the climate challenges since that time, and statistically and scientifically, not just from the heart. And so, composting, like I've never lived without composting. To me, it's a sin to not have a compost pile. And because I also have a garden. And if you're in the city, okay, you're going to have trouble with vermin if you save that compost. So there are ways now of doing composting even in urban areas, and recycling. Thank God it's now popular, because when I first moved to Florida, this little town in Central Florida, when I married my husband, it was in the early 90s and there was no recycling. And I was the only person who loaded up all my recycling and took it to the dump, because that's how committed I am. So now everybody's recycling and composting. So what else can we do? Well, we can take those plastic bags that are sturdy with us to the grocery store instead of having the throwaway ones. Because I must say, I have been in the country of Bolivia, which I love. There's so many indigenous people, but they have a very big problem with the plastic bags floating in the air, and they're sticking to all the bushes and the trees, and it's very disrupting to see a country that has no plastic censoring. And more we're getting away from that. And also the choice of our foods. Now, I'm not a vegan, and I know many yogis are. I don't have any tattoos, and I know many yogis do, but I am careful about the food I eat, and I don't waste. Like, we just had a big family reunion, and we're eating every single little bit of morsel that's left over. And those things that are not to my taste, I'm giving away. So food distribution is really important. And the environment, like, do we all have to have cars? Can't we share? I mean, what's wrong with having a car that, is a family car? Little things like that. It all adds up. And shutting lights off. It's like we were saying earlier, that every choice we make creates the life that we have here. Like where I live, it's paradise because I decided to have xeriscape, no lawn. I have big, beautiful bamboos because I live close to the ocean, so they can suck up the moisture. I don't have to use any water. I don't have any lawn mowing stink or, motor sounds. And so xeriscape is another way. There's so many ways.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and that's becoming much more popular where I am in California because it is a desert, especially
Mm-hmm.
Southern California where my brother lives, and that is
Mm-hmm.
what he's doing. I have a friend that is that's she's studying, we call it native, just planting
Yeah,
things that
xeriscaping
live
is,
here
is
not
so that,
naturally.
yeah, using native plants. And sometimes, it's really a creative way to express yourself, to work with the land. So rip out those lawns, because that's a lot of pesticides and chemicals going into the watershed.
Yeah.
And you can really have fun. It's exercise too. The best exercise in the world is gardening. You
Yeah.
bend and use your body in so many different ways. I mean, there's a million ways I can think of to be kind to this environment, mostly by sending good thoughts and praying. I mean, like, the power of prayer is so enormous that just to hold this big, beautiful globe in our thoughts, and share your kindness with resolving the conflicts and the wars and the oppression. The power of thought is so much a part of being an activist.
I love it. I know we could just keep talking, but our time is short. Is there any
Um,
final words or do you have any final questions, Karen, for our
Now,
guest
I
today?
think we're going to have Teza on again because you have so much information. And like you and I were talking before we went live today, sometimes we have to hear the message numerous times. And I know I'm a recycler and I do what I can composting. I live in a suburban area, I live in a condo, and so I have to be very careful what I put out in the ground. But I do what I can because I know how important that is. And I try to share that with people, the little things that you can do. Most of my neighbors do recycle. I have one neighbor who doesn't. And when I see something out by her trash that is recyclable, I pull it over to mine. You know, if she doesn't want to do it, that's fine. She doesn't care that I do it. And so that's one more thing I can say, that when I leave this earth, I've left it a little bit cleaner. So if everybody just does that one little thing, we can make this world a much better place than it is.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's really, really beautiful. What a kind, beautiful thing.
Any final words, Teza, for our
Well,
listeners?
yeah, I like I was saying before, the power of thought is so important. Like there might be somebody listening, for instance, that can't do anything. Maybe they're a handicapped person, but they can use their mind to really be a strong influence in this world. I mean, people just are waking up to the power of our mind. And you don't have to be a professional meditator, but you can just send good thoughts, just like Karen was saying about being kind to your neighbor, but sending good thoughts instead of always having to have an opinion. I mean, who cares what your opinion is? But people care about kindness, and compassion. And even if it's just you call it a prayer or just sending a thought, but they do a lot of studies on this. They've started with how thoughts affect plants years ago in the 70s, I think. And the thought factor is huge for somebody who is ill, and our planet is ill. The planet needs our thoughts, our good thoughts.
Yes, thoughts from the heart. We just touched upon the chakras. Next time we'll have to talk about the chakras, but yeah, really tap into that heart chakra. You can literally tap your chest. Think those
Yes.
positive thoughts. Thank you so much
Yes, you're welcome.
today. And we'll share your websites and books. And
Mhm.
everybody have a great rest of your day, weekend, wherever you are, whatever time zone.
Thank you, everybody. Talk to you all soon.
Great. Bye-bye.